It's time for an update from the Minnesota Corn Growers Association. Joining us, Blois Olson, political analyst, publisher of Ag Take from Fluence Media. And Blois, talking about the upcoming Minnesota legislative session from an ag rural perspective. What do you see as some of the key areas lawmakers will be taking up in the new year?
One of the narratives that was established during the election and afterwards was this idea of greater Minnesota versus the metro area and where the concentration of, focus from the state legislature should be. I think that will kick off the narrative. And I think on ag issues, I think Republicans who now control the Minnesota House will look for ways to ease some permitting and some environmental regulations. I think water will be a hot issue, and I think they'll look at some labor issues as well and how they affect agriculture in greater Minnesota. I think one of the key factors here is people have been waiting for the federal government to do something around labor and immigration issues, and I think Minnesota may look at ways to attract more workers to greater Minnesota. One of the major issues is that manufacturing in greater Minnesota has continued to grow, and that's drawn some workforce away from agriculture, and I know that ag companies and producers are really looking to try to reestablish that pipeline of it. Well, I think one of the issues that's been floated already is the idea for a property tax cut for folks in greater Minnesota and rural Minnesota, and I would anticipate that Republicans will make that the center point of their budget plan, and that'll be their big bargaining chip. The other issue, other than the budget, that will receive the most attention is transportation and whether or not we invest more in roads and bridges or we continue with the current funding levels, and that will also impact, obviously, greater Minnesota and the idea of how the roads and bridges and safety are in greater Minnesota. Finally, the last issue that I think will get a lot of attention in greater Minnesota is nursing home funding. Nursing homes are often large employers in greater Minnesota, and Republicans are going to push to make sure that they have the funding they need.
Thanks, Blois. Blois Olson, a political analyst with our Minnesota Corn Growers Association update.
This is Corn Matters, an update from the Minnesota Corn Growers Association. The Minnesota legislative session convenes January 6th. According to political analyst Blois Olson, rural Minnesota will be a key talking point during this session.
One of the main narratives of the election and post-election is rural Minnesota versus the Twin Cities, and that's something that House Republicans, who will now be in charge under leader Kirk Dowd, have started to talk about. Some of the ideas they've thrown about are a greater Minnesota property tax cut, more easing of regulations on permitting in greater Minnesota around agriculture, and then, some serious looks at how we can continue to make sure that exports grow.
This is a budget year. With that in mind, roads and bridges could get attention.
My gut is that legislators will be very conservative with the surplus, and I don't think, other than transportation, that any sort of tax increases are on the table.
The mission of the Minnesota Corn Growers Association is to identify and promote opportunities for corn growers. That's because corn matters.